Hey, what's up guys, Zach with Wire Customs, and today I'm going to show you how to replace your old generator with this Powermaster alternator that I got from Vintage Auto Garage. My arm's getting heavy just holding this old generator. This thing's so heavy. So the very first thing that we need to do on any car, no matter what model it is disconnect the battery. It's very, very easy to get some of these alternator wires, battery wires, to arc against the body. And worst case scenario, you could start a fire. So next, I'm gonna disconnect all the wires on the generator. This one here, this one right here. Now some of these will be double nutted, so you'll need 2 wrenches to keep the terminal from spinning. All right, now I'm gonna take the big nut off that holds the generator in place. Now, here's the time if you have a fan on a later flathead, that bracket's also connected to this bolt here on the front. That gives tension to the belt for the fan and also gives tension to the belt for the generator. So you just need to be careful, make sure you don't drop the fan out of the car or anything crazy like that. Okay, now that the tension is off and the generator is sitting down, I can pick up and pull the belt off the front of this. I'm gonna go ahead and take the belt all the way off, and the generator can get picked up and pulled right out of place. Now I got this Powermaster from Vintage Auto Garage. This thing is so much lighter than the original generator, and it's gonna charge way better than the original generator. Now speaking of fans, the Powermaster bracket also comes with the bolts for the fan if you have a later style fan, or if you have just a different style fan setup. If you're going on an old hot rod, I would go with this alternator generator look like. Just for weight reductions alone, this thing is well worth it. So as beautiful as this thing is, you need to remember that this is an alternator, a 1-wire alternator, not a generator. This has a triggering device on the inside of it. When this spins, it turns the alternator on and tells it to charge. In order for that trigger to actually work, the housing needs to be grounded, otherwise this won't charge. There's 2 things that I like to do. One, I'm going to grind the intake surface where this bracket sits, so this will be nice and grounded to the intake. Your motor should be completely grounded to the battery itself, so technically the intake surface should ground it. Also, another thing that you could do is take one of these bolts out, or just partially out, and put one of those finger eyelets in here and actually ground the housing from the back of this bolt here. Make sure you keep that in mind when installing it on your car, otherwise it will not charge at all. Now when it comes to your voltage regulator, it is no longer needed. You have 2 options. You can just leave it there, or you can take it out and remove all the wiring that goes to the voltage regulator. Depends, for me it depends on the customer, it depends on the car. This car, we want it to look as original as possible, so we're going to keep the voltage regulator right here on the cowl. What I'm going to do, just for my own mental sanity, is I'm going to cut the end of the wires off that used to bolt to the generator, and I'm going to put crimp on them, throw shrink wrap over the whole thing, shrink it down, so there's no possible chance that they could arc against any wires up here on the intake, and hide them underneath the spark plug wires, just so we don't have to cut any extra wires out. So that choice is up to how you want it to look. Now since this alternator is so light compared to the generator, I can comfortably lean over the car and slide this down over my intake. So be ready to put my belt on. So I'm going to slide that up and over and make sure it's contacting the crank and my water pump, since this is a flathead. Now here's the fun part. If you have a fan, you're going to have to get the fan tension really tight and alternator tension really tight at the exact same time. Great thing about a V-belt is that it's harder for a V-belt to slip. So get it nice and snug and check the tension. Now since I'm by myself, I'm going to snug this up with a wrench to the point where this alternator can be pulled up. It's still going to fall down under tension, but it's going to be a little bit easier for me to get the belt tension correct. And I really wish there was room for an impact, but there's not. Okay, that's about where I like it right there. Now something to keep in mind, what year flathead engine you have with what year Powermaster that you have. Now the ABA style has a bracket that goes on, then the alternator slides into the bracket. What's great about that setup is the alternator is adjustable front and back with inside that bracket to get your alignment perfect for the belt. Now here's a problem that a lot of people make with alternators. They think now we are done, just hook the wire straight up to the battery and that's it. Not quite. I picked up a couple more items from Vintage Auto Garage. They also gave me enough wire in the correct size to go from alternator to our amp gauge back to the battery, if that's the type of setup that you have, or from the alternator straight to the battery. Now this is more than just buying a wire. This wire also goes with this fuse. You need a fuse on your alternator. A lot of people don't realize that. There's this awesome fuse kit right here, 125 amps and a replacement fuse you can put in your glove box in case something bad happens later on down the road. But this is a nice little holder inside this package. I want to show it to you real quick. This fuse literally bolts down into this bracket. Then after you get your wires on both ends, you just go ahead and clip this over and it hides it away and it can't arc on anything this way. Now just a side note, I specialize on early Fords and a lot of guys like to keep their cars stock looking. So that's what's great about the Powermaster, but also I have cloth cover that goes over these wires and makes it look like a cloth wire, old school. So you can still have the safety of this new wire, but also have the look of the vintage wire. Now this step is as easy as just putting the eyelet onto the lug on the back of the alternator and routing the wire away from anything that could be really hot, keeping in mind that the wire could vibrate and rub against something. Okay, so now the wire is real low and then underneath anything that could rub and possibly ground it in the future. Worst case scenario, we're safe because we're going to put a fuse on this wire. Okay, so now I'm going to show you quickly how to make the connection for the fuse. We're just going to take our wire and strip it back at most 1/4 of an inch. Now in the kit it comes with the eyelets that you need, so go ahead and pull the eyelets out of the kit, slide it on, double check to see how far that wire comes through that eyelet. I like the wire to barely stick out of this end of the eyelet here, so I know it's going to have good contact when I crimp it. I use Milwaukee Crimpers, really simple setup. You can get this at almost any hardware store. And I'm going to use the teeth of the crimp on the bottom, crimp it down, and always do a pull test to make sure you can't pull this off. Now on the other side of the wire, that's going to be going to the battery. I'm also going to strip it, so I want to cut this as straight as possible first. Strip it. So I'm going to go ahead and crimp it down. Always do the pull test. It can't pull off. It's good to go. Now, here's our little terminal. And all we need to do now is take the bolt in, or the nut ends off here. And our fuse is what's going to be connecting the terminal end to end. So I'm going to go ahead and put my fuse down first. I'm going to have my eyelet from the alternator. Put that bolt on. Then here's my eyelet going to the battery. And put that on here. I also have another option of going to the amp meter first, coming out the amp meter, coming back here. But this is just how I like to set mine up. Tighten those down, and we're just going to clip the plastic cover back over the top of this, and this is going to be nice, safe, and secure. Now, Vintage Auto Garage does give you a bigger eyelet in case you want to run the alternator wire to the battery side of the starter solenoid. Now, I am in the middle of converting this car over from 6-volt positive ground to 12-volt negative ground. I have a whole video on everything that you need. Check that out on my YouTube channel or the Vintage Auto Garage YouTube channel as well. So that's it, guys. It's really that simple to hook up. You just need to make sure you know that the alternator needs to ground off the engine. I think the Powermaster is a great upgrade to your charging system and reliability of your overall car. Now you can actually add a decent radio in your car, you can add electric windows. There's so much more that you could do with an alternator that you really can't do very well with a generator. Make sure you check out Vintage Auto Garage if you want to buy more parts like this. They have a great section for electrical if you're doing any type of 6-volt to 12-volt conversions. Distributors, spark plug wires, you name it, they got it. Check that out. Thank you for watching, guys. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel. Now stop watching YouTube, get out in the garage, and get your shift together.